Welcome to this episode of Author Ecking. I'm Travis Davis, your host. Tell us your story. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Author Ecking. On this episode, I am very privileged to have John Winn Miller, who is an accomplished author, editor, reporter, you name it, and also a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. So, John, take it away to tell everybody about yourself, what they already don't know, because I mean, you've done a lot.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me first. I appreciate it. I'm a Kentucky native, grew up in Kentucky, and then ended up being a foreign correspondent based in Rome for the AP and the Wall Street Journal. Returned home, was a reporter, investigative reporter here in Lexington for the local paper, and I was part of a team that wrote a series on education that actually led to a huge reform of education, and was a Pulitzer finalist, won the top award from investigative reporters and editors and from the Society of Professional Journalists. Then I moved on and became the head editor at newspapers in State College, Pennsylvania, Tallahassee, Florida. And then I was promoted again to publisher of newspapers in Olympia, Washington, and then Concord, New Hampshire.
I think you've been every degrees of a compass.
Yeah, I have been to more places than I haven't, I think. Antarctica is the only continent I have not been on yet. And then after, when the newspaper business went in the toilet back 2008, 2012, something like that, I took a buyout and decided I wanted to learn how to write screenplays. And so the problem was I had nothing to write about. And the funny thing was, I was watching a TV show with my daughter, who is now an actress on TV. And we were watching some terrible action adventure movie, and I kept saying, I know I can write a better screenplay than this.
Exactly.
So that night, I went to bed, and believe it or not, I had a dream. And in that dream, when I woke up the next day, I knew the first scene of the screenplay, the last scene, and the name of the ship, the Peggy C, which became The Hunt for the Peggy C, which was a screenplay. And I actually got some traction. I got some meetings in Hollywood, wrote some other screenplays, wrote a TV pilot with my brother, who is a film editor, and a director named John Harrison, who directed Dune and Children of Dune for Sci-Fi, none of which sold. Right. So I put it aside for years. And then when I did retire, I decided, I think I'll write a novel. I've never done it. But the reason I became a journalist was because I wanted to learn how to write novels. So 30 years later, COVID hits. I've got a screenplay. Well, let's see if I can turn it into a novel. Problem is, and we can talk about this later, writing a novel is very different from writing journalism or from even writing screenplays. So I had to learn how to do that. I took some classes, I read 1 million books, watched videos. So I finished The Hunt for the Peggy C, finally sold it to a publisher, Bancroft Press, and it came out last November. Okay. And when I originally turned it in, the publisher said, you need to just keep writing. So I said, okay. So I actually wrote the sequel, finished it, and it'll come out next year. And I'm 3/4 the way through the 3rd volume. So I write just pretty much every day and just keep plowing along. As you know, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I try to do 1,000, 1,500 words a day. Because
whoa!
Yeah.
Oh my God, you are!
I can knock them out. I can knock them out.
No, I can't.
But I'm still trying to market the other books, right? So and then some days you don't. Some days you're like, okay, if I'm happy to get 500
Yeah,
or whatever. But if I start writing a scene, I want to complete the scene because I have it all in my head that I need to get it out.
that's
Well,
spectacular.
yeah.
Well, my method is I know the beginning and the end and a
Mm,
few scenes in the middle, and I have a general idea who the characters are, but
right.
I end up writing a bio of all the major characters.
Mm,
And I don't put any pressure on myself. I sit
yeah.
down on the computer every day and I spend a
Mm,
lot of time research
yes.
because it's historical fiction and I want it to be accurate
Right.
and both the technology and the history because it takes place in World War II. It involves an American smuggler who struggles to rescue a Jewish family from Nazi occupied Amsterdam on his
Mm-hmm.
cargo ship,
Mm-hmm.
which outrages his mutinous crew of misfits and triggers a hair-raising chase by a brutal U-boat captain bent on revenge. So I had to learn all of that stuff.
You got to learn whole new vernacular, whole new terminology, whole way of speaking. Because I come from an army background, and
Yeah,
so I'm writing a book that has some naval components. I'm like, now I got to say skipper, I got to say the galley, and all these different vernaculars that you use. But you're right. Writing fiction, there is a tremendous amount of research in there because you want to make what you put in there either factually true from a historical perspective,
right.
or when somebody reads it, they're going, eh, I, I believe that. We can have, do we have that? Do we have that already? I just don't know. So from that
Yeah.
perspective.
So I'll spend, I may write 250 words. I
Mm-hmm.
may get up to 500. I may do no words and just do research. So
Mm-hmm.
and the problem with doing research is it's fun. So I'll discover something interesting and then I'll go down a rabbit hole saying, oh, well,
Yep.
let me follow that down. Well, there's more
Exactly.
interesting stuff. And before you know it, the day is shot. I've got, maybe some few good details out of that,
Yep.
uh, but I knew, people asked me, why did you write about a submarine, U-boats and World War
Mm-hmm.
II? And again, it was the dream. It picked me. And so
Oh, wow. That's
I've
amazing.
never been on a U-boat. I've never been on a cargo
Well, that's
ship.
good.
uh,
There's
and
one in San Francisco you can get on.
well,
Down at
there's one
the
there, and there's a museum in Chicago that has
yes,
a
that's right.
the U-505 that's very similar to what I described my villain's U-boat is, but it happened during COVID, so I couldn't
Right.
go up. So I've watched
Ah,
videos of it. I read
yep.
about it. There's some very cool websites. There's one called uboat.net that is dedicated to everything U-boat.
Oh,
So you
wow.
can find out where every U-boat was every day of the war, what ships got sunk where, bios of all the U-boat captains. And then I even found another site called uboataces.net or
Mhm.
.org or U-boat archives where you can read in English the logs of all of the U-boat captains, their daily war logs, where we are, what the
That would
moon
be
is.
interesting because you get their thought process, right?
Yeah,
What they do, the things they did.
exactly. And they report a whole bunch of
Mhm.
things like the weather, what they saw, how, any repairs, things like that.
Mhm.
So I was so obsessed with getting things right that I found diaries for the days that corresponded with every day of my voyage. It's a 3,000-mile chase. So I could tell you exactly what the moon phase was that day. So when I
Mhm.
wrote a scene and the U-boat comes up, I know if it's a new moon or a full moon.
Exactly.
That's how obsessive I got with the research.
Well, what I found out too by doing all the research and learning things that nobody wants to talk to me at parties anymore because
Yeah,
I have all
that's
this like
true.
we don't care.
Yeah, I am kind of a know-it-all
Yeah,
now because
so
I tell.
yeah, you just have all this knowledge. You want to tell somebody, and they're like, okay,
Well, I tell people that when you finish the hunt for the Peggy C, you will know how to sail a U-boat
oh
because
wow, that's cool.
I go into that much detail, how the firing system for
Mm-hmm.
the torpedoes,
Mm-hmm.
the 8.8 centimeter cannon that they have on the front, how they don't really have sonar or radar,
Right.
how they communicate. It's in that little tiny tin can. What I want you to feel, smell, and hear what it's like for the sailors who are in there. Same thing with the tramp steamer, which is just this old rusty cargo ship that goes from port to port looking for cargo. They don't have a set schedule. And so that's why my hero, a guy named Captain Jake Rogers, is a smuggler. That's the way he makes his money. And he ended up there because, well, people are not sure how an American ended up with an American ship, still neutral. This takes place before D-Day.
Okay.
In Europe, and the rumor is that he fled America because of a rumor of a murder that he was involved in, and they know he had something to do with U.S. Naval Academy, that he had fled there, and he's been in Europe for 20 years, and no one double crosses him. He's a tough guy, but with a twist, he's more brainy than brawn. He's a big tough guy, but he's a huge reader. And his cabin is lined with books of all the naval classics and other books. So I had to learn a whole lot in order to do that.
I spent 9 years in Europe, in Germany, in the Army. And I actually went to Bavarian movie studio where Das Boot was filmed.
Oh, really?
And it's interesting because it's just like a pool, like a pool. And it has a little model that's, scale.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to see the cinematography and everything that went into that movie, because that is a fantastic movie.
It
I think it's one of the the first modern era World War II movies about a U-boat. Yeah. Typically they were about our boats.
Yeah. Interestingly, I had to be careful, with the possible exception of Das Boot, which I watched years ago, but I consciously did not rewatch it while I was writing, because I didn't want to steal any scenes, and I didn't trust the technology of any of the movies I've seen. They've all riddled with anachronisms or with the wrong technology. The little things like when you fire a torpedo on a U-boat, the captain never says fire, because that indicates the ship's on fire and everybody panics. They go torpedoes los, which means torpedoes away.
Right. Yeah.
So if you ever see a movie where they say fire on anybody's ship, that's not true.
Huh. That's interesting. I never thought of that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little details that even I just recently watched Das Boot because I love the movie. But even then, I discovered a bunch of little technical problems, things they did that were not accurate to what my research had showed is the way things would be.
That's why I can't watch Army war movies, because I look at their ribbons, I go, they're wrong.
Yeah. Actually, I studied the ribbons and medals that the U-boat captains or the head of the U-boats, Admiral Dunitz, because I wanted to be able to describe them accurately and understand what they were. So the movies were fun. So, like you, some of the movies, I think there's one U-571, maybe Michael McConaughey or something.
Oh, I saw that one. Yeah.
It's terrible. It's just completely inaccurate. So one of the things I did do, a couple of things, is when I finished, I had my college roommate was in the Navy, was an officer. So I had him read it for any mistakes. And then I hired a former naval or warrant officer for an American submarine, who's also an author, and Matt Zola, who writes historical novels like I do. And he read it, and he corrected some of the little things I never would have guessed.
Right.
little things like you can't whistle on a ship. I had a character walking around whistling. He said, "You can never do that." I said, "Why?"
Because they're waiting for
He said,
instructions.
well, they are, because the instructions come from the bosun's pipe.
Yeah.
You hear that?
Yeah.
Doo, doo, doo,
Yep.
doo.
Yep. Yep.
And if you're whistling, that could confuse people. And so you never whistle. So I had them hum instead of whistle.
Right.
And that there's a difference between saying I and I, Captain.
Ah.
If you're given a standard order, like, helm 35 degrees in,
Right.
all ahead half or something like that, that's a standard order. So you'll just say I, which
Right.
means I'll comply. But if he's giving you an order that is not a standard order, say, I want you to do this and then that, you say I, which means I understand and I will comply. So
Oh, okay.
I had to go through the whole book of what he fortunately went through for me and switched them so I would get that accurate. And he
That's
also
interesting.
corrected some of my steering instructions because I'm not a sailor and I could read about what they should be.
Right.
But
That's amazing.
yeah,
And that detail. That's
yeah,
historical fiction. You want it to be historically accurate, but with a fictional story.
yeah. You want drama. My
Believable
character,
though.
yeah, believable. And that's another thing I did in the research. Lot of the action scenes I have are based on real action scenes because I didn't want it to be just wacky. I wanted something that was plausible that
Right.
had happened. And I may have exaggerated it some, or I would combine real historical events.
You have been to Hollywood.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that anyone, a sailor or anyone else reading it, they wanted to double check what I wrote.
Right.
I could plausibly say that, hey, this may sound crazy, but it actually happened in this case.
Right.
So my villain is the U-boat captain is Victor Brower, and he's actually based on 3 different U-boat captains who did particularly nasty things. And so I could create the motivation for why he is so obsessed with catching the Peggy C, and why he was willing to disobey orders or sneakily disobey orders.
Right.
In order to chase Captain Rogers and the Peggy C.
Yeah, they didn't have an infinite amount of fuel on those things, right? I mean, those were diesel subs. They're not the nuclear power. They had to come up for air for the batteries and all sorts of stuff.
Well, in Admiral Dunitz, who created the U-boat force, would always say that they're not submarines, they're diving vessels, because they can only stay underwater 24, 48 hours, maybe, before the battery acid starts leaking and poisonous chlorine gas into the U-boat. There's a scene about that in Das Boot, which was pretty accurate. So they typically like to attack on the surface because they can move at 17 knots. They can maneuver faster. They can use their cannon as well as their torpedoes. Underneath, submerged, they can only go 7 knots, which is slower than the slowest ancient ship.
Right. That's like current speed.
Yeah. So, and you have to use your batteries up. They have like 264 batteries lined across the bottom, but those run out because you're not only running the engine, but you're running the filtration system to take the carbon dioxide out of the air and breathe in new air. So you have to surface if you want to recharge the batteries
and live.
And live. And the diesels have to be running to and they can't operate underwater. At least they couldn't for the first large part of the war. Towards the end, they figured out a snorkel system so they could just barely be over the surface and recharge the batteries.
It seemed like they put like a some kind of pipe or something that would pipe fresh air into the sub or wherever the compartment is, and recycle that out another one, like a heat pump.
Yes. And they actually did that towards the end of the war. The problem is, in order to do that, you would have to be pretty close to the surface. 14 meters, like 14, 15 yards is periscope depth.
Right.
And that's where you would have to be, which makes you a little bit more vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. Depth charges and just
depth charges. And the Allies they had a primitive form of sonar called ASDIC that could sort of find the submerged vessels. And they also depended on audio to find them. So it was the technology was really pretty primitive.
That's interesting. I mean, that's very, very realistic, right? It's like almost like you're reading a history novel or a maintenance manual of a sub, right?
Yeah.
But then it has the human touch, the story behind it. Why is it doing these things? Or even the merchant vessel, right? And all that stuff. So I had a question. Were you in Italy when the prime minister was kidnapped and killed?
No, I came
Moro,
shortly after that. Moro, Aldo Moro, right?
Yeah.
I had been there as an intern for an English language newspaper right before that happened, when the Red Brigades kidnapped him and put him in a trunk.
Yeah.
And then I came back right after that for the AP. And the Red Brigades were still pretty active.
Yep.
Pope John Paul II had just been shot. I ended up covering the trial of the Turk who shot the Pope, Mehmet Ali Agha.
And the Pope forgave him. I remember that.
Yeah, I went with Pope John Paul II into the prison where he forgave the Turk who shot him, who was insane. I mean, absolutely insane. Right. And no one was convicted in that trial because he was so insane. It made just nothing made sense.
Yeah, put him away somewhere. I remember when I was in Germany, late 70s, the Baader Meinhof gang was big, which was, I guess, an offshoot or affiliated or the same thing as the Red Brigade, right? Back at that time when terrorism was just rampant from state perspective, like Germany, they had theirs, and Italy had theirs, and France had theirs, and Northern Ireland and everything. It was just crazy back then. But I love Italy. I've been a few times, and I've been to the Vatican. Amazing place. It's crazy, just amazing. So where's your favorite place?
Wow.
I hate to put you on a spot, just in case you have to go back somewhere else.
I loved Rome. It was utter chaos to live there, but the people were so nice. The food was great. Everything was exciting. Every time you walked around a corner, was something 1,000 years old that was new to you. That was exciting. My daughter was born there. She's, as I mentioned, she's an actress, and sometimes when they write profiles of her, they'll say Italian-born actress Allison Miller, as if she changed her name,
which is not wrong.
No, it's technically right. So they think she's Italian, which she's blonde and blue-eyed and little tiny thing.
So she's Northern Italian.
Yeah, that's true. But it was a lot of fun. It was hard because there was a lot of terrorism. I had a terrible incident where my boss's daughter was murdered by terrorists. They were in the Rome airport when the terrorist Palestinians attacked it. Yeah. And he was shot, his son was shot, his daughter was killed. And I had to cover that as a reporter. So that kind of cut the fun out a little bit.
Well, I was in the Army, and I had a guy that I worked with whose dad worked for Aramco Oil for a long time. This is he was on the Achille Laurel. When it was, but here's the strange thing: the port of call before he was told to get off the ship.
Oh my God.
And then right after
Why?
that, well, he worked for Aramco Oil. Who knows?
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, that's good.
High up, not
Yeah.
a who's up there.
Yeah.
And he was got off the ship, and next thing you knew, the thing was hijacked.
You want to know a funny coincidence? Guess who the second reporter to get on the Achille Laurel when it docked was? Me.
You.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. When it was hijacked, I was with the AP
Mhm.
and they sent me to Genoa
Mhm.
where the ship was going to dock, and it docked. And there were police holding everybody back, and there was one gangplank, maybe 3 or 4 stories high, and they were just going to let the relatives on.
Mhm.
And so I was watching that, and then I noticed the reporter for the New York Times, uh, John Taliabui, was walking a little old lady by the elbow across the gangplank as if he was a relative. And so the worst thing
Oh.
that can happen to a reporter is to get scooped. So if he got on there and he could file a story, I would never hear the end of it. So I
Mhm.
grabbed the elbow of a little old lady and started walking across. Now, the problem is John is of Italian descent and looks Italian. I do not even look like an American. They think I'm
Well,
French because I'm too small.
yeah.
So the police were furious. They grabbed me, or the crew grabbed me, raised me up, and held me over the rail as if they were going to throw me off. And this is 3 or 4 stories up.
Oh,
So I
smokes.
wouldn't have. And fortunately, a police officer grabbed me and shoved me back into the boat. And here's how stupid it is when you're a foreign correspondent. You take
Mm.
risks you don't need to do. 10 minutes later, they let all the reporters on. So, and this
Man,
was
you just
back
need
in
to
the,
wait 9 more minutes.
yeah, if I just waited in the silly part is there were no cell phones back then. So
Right.
there was no way for me to file a story from that
Mm.
ship. I would have to take my notes, run off the ship, find a phone, call long distance. Um, so, but it's funny you would mention the Achille Laurel. So I was a part of that. I
Look, I'm
sometimes
packed
feel
with
like,
useless knowledge.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, don't ask me where my car keys are.
Or I'll be on my phone and go, "Where's my phone?"
Yeah.
That's all that.
Yes, I'm suffering from that too. But
That's amazing. So, what's the name of the book again?
it's called The Hunt for the Peggy C.
Where can we
It's
get it?
available on Amazon or Kobo or any place, no Barnes and Noble, any place you buy books. It's on Audible. Um, and it's on Kindle and hardback. Paperback's coming out later this year, maybe next year. I'm
Okay.
not sure when.
Okay. And so, how do you market your book? Did your publisher market for you, or how do you get it out? Because it's tough. As an author,
Yeah,
it's
it's
tough.
very, very tough. Well, I joined a bunch of organizations to try to learn it, the Authors Guild.
I got that.
And then I went to a website called readsy.com,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I hired my editor from, but they also have a bunch of things on marketing. Uh, uh, then I found some books on how to market. I tell you, and I tried just about everything. I even hired a PR firm for
Mm-hmm.
the first few weeks. Very expensive, but they got me a lot of
Right.
decent publicity. My publisher did do a lot of marketing. He paid for reviews on Kirkus and
Which is
some
not
other.
cheap, folks.
No,
It's
it
not
is not
cheap.
cheap. Um, but then I entered contests,
Mm-hmm.
some of which I did pretty well in.
Right.
The Clive Cussler Adventure Writers Award. I was the
One of my
semifinalist.
most favorite authors, because I can read one of his books and be immersed in it, but knowing that a bunch of stuff in there is ain't no way, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But they are so enjoyable,
Yep.
from the different. Uh, but I think there's four different books of Clive Cussler. Not
Yeah.
how many he wrote, but the
Yeah.
different ones, right?
Series. Yeah.
Yeah, the different series. And uh, I remember in the army, I read Hunt for Red October, and I was like, man, I'm gonna join the Navy. I wanted to be in submarines. I figured, oh, I'll lose the rank. I go,
that was actually Tom Clancy's
Tom
first
Clancy.
book.
Oh no, Tom. I like him. So I think Robert Ludlum, Clive Cussler, Tom Clancy are the.
Yeah,
My first book I remember ever really reading was The World According to Garp.
really, that was
Yes,
a brilliantly written,
yes,
just spectacular language.
yes.
And funny thing is that I tried when I tried to write a novel,
Mm,
I tried to write like other novelists,
mm.
and like him, John. It's not John Grisham. It's oh my God, I can't remember his name. Anyway, or like John le Carre or others. I would try to write like them, and it didn't work. I'm not that kind of writer.
Right, right,
I'm not Faulkner. So I had
right.
to go back and rewrite and tell the story kind of like a journalist
Mm,
on steroids. I mean, a little bit
right.
more. So I had to learn how to write. But marketing, uh, I entered book contests, bought reviews from reputable companies
Right.
that I could use as book. And I got one of the things I did before the book came out is I emailed a bunch of authors who wrote similar type books and begged them to give me a blurb.
Wow.
And it was surprising. Many of them did, and they read the book and they really liked it. So
Right.
that was, the added bonus was they actually liked the book that they were giving me blurbs for.
Excellent.
So that was useful. And then, I've tried advertising, the on
I don't find it
Amazon, and
very. I
doesn't work.
just no. I don't think it does. I don't think Facebook works. I don't think TikTok.
Nope.
I don't think the Amazons. I
No.
think it just doesn't work. I don't know why. I've never tried it.
I will tell you a couple that do work, and I
Mm.
was surprised. There's a site called BookBub,
Yes.
and what the way I can tell it sells is I learned how to do Amazon attribution. So you can go on your site on Amazon and you can create a link that you can then use on other sites, and it will tell you. So I created a BookBub link, and when I bought advertising there, I could see it got 600 clicks, but then I could look at Amazon attributes, 600 clicks, 43 sales. I couldn't see, and then I did the same thing with Facebook. I could see the number of clicks, 2 sales. So I knew, okay, BookBub actually works.
Right.
The other service that I used that actually drove a lot of sales is called Book Lover. BookLuver.com. It's a British, it's the largest British review site. And I bought their newsletter and I got a ton of clicks. I don't know if I got purchases.
Right, right.
But yeah, you're right. Amazon, Facebook, I just haven't had much luck with any of them. There's Book Tweeters, there's Book Riot. I've tried them all. And the best thing, another author told me the best way to sell your first book is to write a second book. And
that's what I did. Now I'm writing the third, and they're not sequels, right? They're the same characters, but they're independent. Where you want to read the first, if you read the second, say, how did this become a team? How do these people even originate, right? And then the third, and I'm kind of like you, is I'll write the beginning and I know the end, and I'll write stuff that or I'll put bullets inside of it. Say I need to talk about this.
Yep.
But I have to get the beginning right.
Yep.
To continue, or it doesn't make any sense. And mine, I have to make sure from a time perspective everything lines up, right? Like 2 days is 2 days somewhere else. If I go down there, it's tomorrow. I mean, it can't be, right. That's the hardest thing that I have to do. I got like a timeline. I use a mind map. I don't outline. I do like a mind map of it.
Now I do. I write since I learned how to write screenplays. I know how to do a scene and build character arcs. And the thing is, I'm trying to build the tension. It's the further you get in the book, the more trouble they get in. And I typically will write my characters into a corner and then say, now how do I get them out? Right. So then I'd have to figure out a way to get them out. And by the time I get to towards the end of the book, it's the third act.
Mhm.
The dialogue pretty much goes away. The scenes are shorter. The tension goes greater. The threat becomes more and more. That's the only part that I actually will stop and kind of outline, because I
Right.
got to remember, how am I going to tie all
Exactly.
these strings together and
Exactly.
get out in a with an ending that a famous screenwriter, the guy once said that the best ending is one that is unexpected but satisfies the reader.
Right.
It's logical. It gives
Right.
them what they want, even though it's unexpected. It doesn't have to be a happy ending.
Right.
So
I agree.
the writing process, it's fun. It's some days it's agonizing because you're trying to work your way out of a corner or a puzzle, or you remember, oops, I
I've done
forgot
that.
about this character. What happened
Yeah.
to him?
Yeah. I've talked to people that have read the book, and when he says, he goes, yeah, he goes, at the beginning you build it up, and he goes, but the end of the book is so fast,
Yeah.
right? You know, and I've talked, multiple reviews and everything. It's a roller coaster at the end, which that's what I want it to be, right? I want to build up, to something.
So most people like what majority of the people like what I write. Now, some criticism I've gotten is they call it author interruption, because I want people to understand the history or the technology. I will, in the middle of the action, explain like the firing sequence for a torpedo, or define some terms like,
I'm guilty
where
of
did
that.
the term, and where did the term ton come from? A ship in tons actually doesn't measure weight, it measures volume. And why does it measure volume? So I get on the sideline. My editor will edit most of that out. So for the second volume, what I did is, the second book involves a whole bunch of real characters, including my characters. And it's hard to tell if you don't know the history, which ones are real and which ones aren't. So at the end, I put a what happened to them section, and I list all the real characters and give a little paragraph on what really happened to them. And I also, and I don't think I can get away with this as a novelist, I did cut a bunch of the background out of the second book and put it at the end under heading background.
That's tough. Background and characters, because you don't want to reintroduce the characters in your second or subsequent books, because if people might have read the first one, go, I already know that. How much do you put to where they make it interesting?
Yeah. So I have a few paragraphs of background of the first book, The Hunt for the Peggy C. Here's how we got here. And then from the book itself, this book, the second book, I'll take, like I had a long section on Churchill's relationship with Ireland, troubled relationship. Really fascinating, but also really slow. So I cut that out and put it at the back of the book in a section called background, that if you want to read more about it, when you get to the end, you can read. But in the book itself, I just kind of allude to why he had such a bad relationship with Ireland.
Interesting. So where can everybody get a hold of you?
I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. I have a website called www.johnwinnmiller.com. To spell my name, JOHNWINN Miller.com. And I think those are all the places you can find me.
I think that's all there is.
Yeah.
You got Instagram and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah. But if you go to my website, you can read a lot of the background. You can read the reviews of the book, see the awards it's won. If I were smart, I would have a button. Well, you can order the book there too, but I would have a button for let me know when the sequel is available. I need to do that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of, just so much you got to think outside the box, right? That's the thing, is you got to think about something that maybe hasn't done from that. And that's why I created the podcast, because I didn't know what I was doing. I may still not. Not.
That's none of us do.
I know how to start a Zoom meeting. I can do that. I can talk. I know, I've been around. I can talk about a bunch of silly stuff. John, it has been a privilege talking to you today, though. Man, I feel like I've just had some kind of history class. No test, though. There's no test.
Yeah, no quiz afterwards. You're okay.
No,
This is a
so folks, go out there and check it. They're very interesting books. Go out and check out his book. And I think you'll be impressed, especially if you do World War II, anything with maritime, submarines, technology, that air. Go out and check out his books, and then looking forward to it. So again, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for listening to Author Eke. There'll be another episode next week. Please stop by and start your own story. We can't wait to hear it.